One of the most misunderstood things in Star Wars is the Jedi's rule around attachments. And I blame this on the fact that we have two different Star Wars continuities and the timelines in them treat it differently and they treat it differently from each other. So let's talk about that. I'm John Barry 555. This is the Jedi Ranger, and we are talking about the Jedi's no attachment rule. Trying to understand it and why at the same time it doesn't make that much sense in how we understand it. So first, let's address the obvious. The Jedi no attachment rule. What does it actually mean? And that's where the problem comes with. Canon has a different interpretation than Legends, and if you look at the different timelines in Legends before and after the prequels, they also treat the attachment rule differently. So before George Lucas made the prequels, there was not much about what the Jedi were like before A New Hope. Everything the authors were creating was set afterwards, and they were only small little things that wouldn't likely interfere with what George Lucas was planning was allowed to be told or being made about the before the Empire, before A New Hope. And what does that tell us? What do those stories tell us about the Jedi's no attachment rule? Nothing. Luke didn't know about it until we as the audience knew about it, even though timeline-wise that doesn't make sense. But the point being is, no story addressing no attachment rule until George Lucas introduced the no attachments rule. Luke's Jedi Order allowed Jedi to marry, to have families, to have relationships. And when George Lucas introduced that concept in the prequels, the writers of Legends decided to make it that, oh, Luke discovered it and he decided it was stupid. Because they couldn't retcon everything. One Jedi get married, sure. A bunch? No, they couldn't do that. They couldn't retcon that. So they made it that when Luke learned about it, he decided that it was a silly rule, led to his father's fall to the dark side, and therefore healthy relationships should be encouraged and not hidden, because hidden relationships is a problem. That's almost how I would say post-Empire, so post-in-universe Empire Jedi handled the no attachments. It was, you gotta be honest about it. You can't let it control you, but you can have them. You can have relationships. You can have attachments. Just don't become possessive, become controlling of them. And that's ultimately is actually what Anakin's problem is, both in Legends and in canon. Anakin is more in love with the idea of being with Padme than actually being with her. Like, literally. I think probably one of the most important things in any healthy relationship is listening to your partner. Well, what about the episode of the Clone Wars where Anakin beats Rush Clovis with his bare hands? One of them is a metal replacement, by the way. And Padme is telling him to stop, telling Anakin to stop. Yes, Clovis probably did deserve a good sucker punch in that scene, but after the first one, once Padme started telling Anakin to stop, he should have stopped. It was making her feel uncomfortable. And she still stayed with him. But then again, she stayed with him after, or fell in love with him after he massacred the Tusken Raiders. So, yeah, so, yes, the implication there is not that great about men that she's attracted to. But the thing I really wanted to point out with that is Anakin is possessive of Padme to the point that he's not even listening to her own wishes, and that's a huge problem. That's a very strong attachment that could, where his emotions can dictate his actions. Seriously, in Revenge of the Sith, what does Anakin do? He doesn't stay in the Jedi Council chamber. No, he goes in and ends up falling to the dark side. He was almost there anyhow. And honestly, I partially blame Mace Windu, but only because he knew Anakin was emotionally unstable, that this would have been a conflicted time for him. He knew of Anakin's friendship with Palpatine. He should have given Anakin something to do besides wait. I don't know. Tell him, you know what? We've heard this delegation of 2000. Go talk to them and let them know that what we're doing, so we can have some Senate allies. Give Anakin a task to do, Windu, please. He needed something to do to distract himself. But would that have worked? Probably not. But the point being is Anakin needed something to do. Otherwise, his attachment definitely, and as we saw, controlled his behavior. His attachment to Palpatine in that instance, actually. But still, Palpatine helped forge those attachments. Maybe if Qui-Gon Jinn was still around, he would have had a better father figure who would have taught him about healthy attachments, how to let go, when is the proper time to let go of a relationship and all that. But that's getting into speculation theory. We gotta go back on topic to the Jedi's no attachment rule. we already addressed that. It's clearly that in all forms of Jedi, that possessive, controlling attachments are not allowed. And if you look at what Legends started doing after the prequels was made, look at the Star Wars: The Old Republic. You have Jedi dynasties going on. Granted, there's also some filmy drama involved in that, and that may have contributed to the Jedi deciding, you know what, we should probably ban Jedi getting married. Unless you're from a species with a low birth rate, then go ahead, Kiamundi, you can have a family. Just don't get attached to them. Which apparently he was not close to his family at all. He showed up to do his culturally expected duties, and that was it. So maybe a bit too far to the extreme end of things. So I think the reason why so many people misunderstood the Jedi's no attachment rule is because they see it as total. They see it like, can Jedi not have friends? Can Jedi not have, families? But Jedi have had families before. And it also doesn't have that in the narrative of Legends that Luke decided that the no attachment rule as practiced in the prequel era Jedi, even though he didn't know Clone Wars the era Jedi, he decided that was stupid. And I think that's where a lot of misunderstandings. We can have discussions, and if we don't specify if we talk about Legends and canon, we can also have some confusions within our own discussions about the rule. So what do I think is the Jedi knows attachment rule? How should it be looked at? And I think basically the idea that it's about that possessive attachment. If you can let go of your attachment, it's all right. If you can understand that when things are time for things to end, it's all right. That's, I think, what it's ultimately about. Being able to move beyond the attachment. Becoming one with the Force. That's how Jedi often describe their death, because they become one with the cosmic and living Force upon their deaths. But look at the Jedi who not just die, but no, they lose their corporeal form. They become one with the Force, literally unable to manifest themselves. They fully were able to let go of all their, well, I was going to say earthly, but they don't have earth in Star Wars, worldly, all their temporal possessions and things. And then being literally a part of the Force with the consciousness, they're able to then help the people of the galaxy, help implement the will of the Force. We're getting a lot of metaphysical, but isn't that what the Jedi are about? Not being dictated by their emotions, not being dictated by the temporal world, even though they certainly are, to minimize risk, to minimize suffering. And kind of to do that, you can't have specific attachments. If a Jedi is married to a politician, they may consider turning their head if their politician spouse is doing something that's hurting others. It's theoretically possible. And we can go into a lot more. But there's another thing I want you to bring up. Obi-Wan Kenobi. I definitely think Luke's approach to attachments is very much influenced by Obi-Wan's, both in Legends and in canon. We don't know too much about, per se, how that's already in canon. In Legends. But one thing for sure is, we know that in Legends, all of Obi-Wan's canon relationships existed and then some. Well, I think all of them. Again, it depends on what we are talking about in the timeline and what stories have been made and not made when I'm talking about, and which ones I remember and don't remember. But in Legends, Obi-Wan had Siritachi, a Jedi that he had a relationship, though it didn't go anywhere because she died in the Clone Wars. But Satine also exists in both Legends and canon. And in an episode of the Clone Wars, which exists in both Legends and canon, despite how the Clone Wars TV show does not always fit into Legends, Obi-Wan literally tells Satine that if she had said the word, he would have left the Jedi Order. And there I think Obi-Wan is seeing attachments as obligations. You can have only one big obligation. You can still have friends and all that, but if you are to be with someone, you need to commit to being with them. You can't be both seeing someone and being a Jedi. And then I think that's also how Luke sees it, especially in canon, where he offers Grogu in an episode of the Book of Boba Fett for some reason the option to either become a Jedi, the lightsaber, or return to Din Djarin, the Mandalorian chainmail armor. And he chooses to return to Din, his father figure. And some people are like, didn't Luke no, is he just repeating the mistakes? I don't think so, because I think he's following Obi-Wan's line about attachments. It's about your obligations. You can have an obligation to the Jedi, or you can have an obligation to your family, to your spouse, but you can't have both. And isn't that ultimately why Anakin fell to the dark side? No, he had an obligation to both his wife, Padme, and the Jedi Order. and he couldn't do both, mainly because he wanted to have his cake and eat it too, but that's just not possible. He couldn't have both. I do think Legends allowing Jedi to get together is not. It should be, yeah. They're both then obligated to the Jedi Order, so they can be obligated to the Jedi Order in their obligations to each other. Granted, Legends also had some family drama with that involved as well, so maybe not a good idea. But if you follow that line from Obi-Wan to Luke with what we see, and then Anakin as what happens when you try to have both, making the no attachment rule more of a no dual obligations rule is a lot more fitting. And then look at what happened to the Jedi Order as a whole. They had an obligation to the people of the galaxy and to the Republic. And the Sith, Palpatine, took full advantage of that to rope them into the Clone Wars and discredit their reputation to purge them. The Jedi Order had two conflicting obligations, and they couldn't commit to either, and therefore they started failing the people of the galaxy as they kept on getting more obligated to help the Republic. So I think maybe instead of no attachments, it should be no dual obligations. No, total dual obligations. Not just like, well, I promised my friend I'll help them train with the lightsaber. I would say that's different. Or, hey, I promised to go help work at a soup kitchen this week. Is that alright? I think that's perfectly fine to have those kinds. But I'm talking about those big. Marriage, joining a religious order, those are big obligations. Deciding whether you're going to side with the public, the CIS, or being neutral, those are big obligations. Relationship, image-defining obligations. Not something you do one in the evening. I bet there's Jedi who probably have a movie club for all we know. And Jedi who do go and help in soup kitchens and the like. And they can have those obligations because they don't take away. Oh, we missed our movie club. Oh, I'm sorry I couldn't come this week to help you feed the poor. I had to stop a robbery. You know what? Those are things that you can accommodate. They don't consume your other obligations, but marriage can consume your obligations to a religious order. In real life, the Catholic Church barred the clergy, barred the priesthood from marrying to avoid a couple of things. One, they see that the priesthood as we're going to get into some theology stuff, but as being a sacred thing, that the marriage, as a sacrament of marriage is the one, I'm not a Catholic, so I could be getting some of this stuff wrong. But basically, they saw it as super important that you shouldn't have that secondary obligation, and then the political consideration not wanting families to start dominating the church. But the point is that two very strong conflicting obligations is a problem for the Jedi. Can often be a problem in real life as well. And I think that's what the no attachment rule is ultimately about. Having those conflicting, competing obligations. That's how I think that is definitely how I think Obi-Wan saw it, and I think that's also how Luke sees it in canon. Legends, I think, saw it a bit differently. Luke thought the no attachment rule was dumb and allowed Jedi to marry and have family. But I think if we look at no attachment as no conflicting obligations, then I think we're getting somewhere. We're understanding it better. And then it doesn't help that Anakin was a mess as a whole and had his conflicting obligations to the Jedi and to his wife, and also was possessive of Padme and was more in love with the idea of being in love and in a relationship with Padme than actually being with her. And part of that could be the influence of Palpatine and not having an actually positive father figure, because Obi-Wan was more of a brother to him than a father. That would have been Qui-Gon if Qui-Gon wasn't killed by Maul. So that's a lot of things to say, and I hope I didn't confuse you anymore, because I think I confused myself a little bit. But I'm going to summarize it one last time, and hopefully we all will understand. The Jedi's rule about attachments is not so much about preventing them from forming friendships, forming relationships, caring about others, but it's more about having an obligation to something other than the Jedi Order. And the Jedi Order themselves failed at this when they became more obligated to the Republic than to the people of the galaxy and the Force. And I think that's what it boils down to, that conflicting obligations. Was it what George Lucas intended? Probably not. But when you look at committed relationships, yeah, that can get in your way of being a warrior monk that's supposed to follow the will of the Force and protect the people of the galaxy. I can kind of see how that's a bit of a a problem, and why the Jedi probably just to make it easier just tell people no attachments, please. That's at least my interpretation. You can let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give this video a like and share. Also, consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date on all my latest content. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. May the Force be with you always.